come to this one because our urban renewal district is on
Oh, good.
the plate. So.
And you're part of the urban renewal?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Oh.
Sorry, I misdialed something.
And you were doing so well. Now that Dave. What's your last name, Jeremy?
Yeah.
Oh, I know the name.
You do.
You don't look familiar, but.
Yeah, Jen's,
There you go.
been the front facing, but I'm on a few committees, so.
Oh, wonder why I printed out two of those.
So who's on this one now? Is it you, Kelly?
Well, Kelly-
Formerly Kelly, and then,
Cinta.
Cinta. Okay.
And so we'll have a new city council person tonight, so I think there's gonna be some shuffling, because Chelsea Tupin, who's on, the admin and finance committee, might be better on this committee, because we think that Doug Miller would be better on admin and
finance.
finance.
Yeah.
So we'll have a little shuffle there.
Okay.
Public safety and zoning, public safety, health and safety will be the one that still has a vacancy. I don't know if somebody else wants to shuffle around,
Who's on that one so far?
myself and Jody.
Okay. You gotta have at least 3.
Yeah, yeah, and that's an 8 AM meeting, so check people's schedule and see who can do that, which works out really well with Tom Kuntz and the chief,
Yeah.
Chief Schrock. So that's a good time. And it's a good time for Jody before her business
For sure.
opens. That's one of my to-do lists. Do we have to approve David coming on? I don't know how that works.
think they can just come on.
Well,
Can you hear us, Dave?
I can see you. Can you hear us? No. We can't hear you.
It's green, so I think that means it's on.
It is on. I was looking to see if there was a mute or something. I'm gonna give him a call. Is he muted there?
No, nothing's moved there. Nothing for sound on the TV remote, says Dave.
Oh, that's funny. That's really funny. We're trying to get Dave so he can talk to us.
Oh. How's it going?
Oh, we're on camera. Well, that's fun.
Just put them on speaker, I suppose.
I don't hear you.
Have your phone off, Dave. He's got my number. If he can hear us, we can't hear him.
Can you hear us?
Kind of thought he could.
Call it in.
Can't hear you.
Can you hear me via the phone side?
I
Okay,
can hear.
now I hear you.
Now we can hear you.
All right, so what I will do, I'm gonna mute there and the video, oh, what happened to the video part?
We see you.
Oh, okay, I'm gonna go back to the meeting. What I'm doing is I'm just gonna disconnect from the audio there. And I'll be on the audio to see you, but I'll listen to you here.
That'll work.
Okay, okay.
We'll take it. Whatever. Wing it.
Okay, it's just Cinta, myself, and Jeremy Battles.
And a brick.
That was a laptop. It's fine.
That was a laptop. Did you have a chance to read the minutes?
I did. Yes, they're fine.
So you want to move? I'll second.
Yep.
We'll vote.
I move to approve the minutes of our last meeting, January 9th and 23rd of 2024.
And I will second that. Everybody raise their hand. Okay. Our first thing is the dissolution of the discussion and resolution 3632 to extend the airport dissolution of assets until May 1st. We need to have a vote on that tonight. Dave, I know that you were in on that meeting with the airport board, and didn't they say that their next meeting was actually May 6th? Do we think May 1st is enough, or are we just gonna end up extending it again?
I was thinking it was May 31st, but in fairness, I haven't looked at the resolution. I'm wondering if it was a typo.
It says May 1st, and I don't think May has a 31st, does it? But I don't know. It doesn't,
I'm the teacher. I don't know.
we can make it April Fool's Day and simplify it.
May does.
April is before May, so that wouldn't be recommended.
No. Okay, yeah, it does have a 31st.
Yes, there's a 31st.
Do you think?
Yep.
y-
You know this trick, right?
Yeah. So I'm kind of thinking that we should extend it to May 31st, because I don't want to keep doing this, kick the can down the road. And I know that they would have to call a special meeting to, discuss it, because the airport board's next meeting is May 6th.
Well,
So-
I don't disagree with that, but the thing to take into account is that the airport board is a byproduct of this agreement. They really don't get direct says in it. They exist because of this agreement, if that makes sense.
Right, their primary purpose is to figure out all of this, right?
So like when we're doing the negotiations, the commissioners are there not because of their role on the airport board, but rather because of their role with the county. The mayor of Bridger is there not because he also happens to be on the airport board, but because of his role as the mayor. And in fact, we've talked, and he's not going to be involved in most of the negotiations by virtue of the fact that that would create a quorum of the airport board. And so we'll be following up with him independently, but he's already given me his thoughts and inputs.
So do we think that May 1st is sufficient, or should we make it May 31st?
I would do 31st if it were me, but I've already given you my 2 cents that I don't think, I just know that May 31st is 2 blinks away too.
It is. I feel like May 31st is quite a ways.
Yeah, February, March, April, May, but I think May 31st is good. I don't think we've got that many significantly challenging issues ahead of us, so.
Okay, and the 31st is a Friday.
Mm-hmm.
So, Spencer, do you agree that we should ask the city council to extend that, resolution for the disposition of airport assets to May 31st?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with Dave, where I'm like, they've had so much time, but at the same time, I'd rather do it right than right now, right, Dave? So, yeah.
Agreed.
Okay, so we'll bring that up at the city council meeting tonight, because we do need a vote tonight. Okay, the next thing on the list is the planning board, priority list.
And that was, I just printed it, I did not get a chance to really go over this.
Well, they just did, Joanne,
Yeah.
hello.
Hello, how are
Joanne
you?
Eater just came in. To give you an idea, they just went over this, ranking again, once I was on the board because of the board change.
Mhm.
And, the first 2 items, 1 and 2, is the revitalization plan, and the growth policy, which we know have, a grant through Great West to complete. They are gonna have to extend that grant another year, but that's gonna be it. So I think 1 and 2 were pretty well, doing well with. Accessory dwelling unit, the structure definition is something that is on the board, you know, that they do have things pending.
Okay.
So I can understand that being number 3. Either that, or there were some changes, at the state level, compliance with, State Bill 528. And 528 has some changes to zoning and subdivision, and we felt that we needed to review those to make sure we're in compliance. So those are the top 4, on this list. When we get to 5 and 6 and 7, 5 they have is outdoor advertising, the one that failed, that they want to revisit it. 6 is the airport master plan, to review the impact of that. And of course, we know we're not the ones developing it, and it isn't developed yet.
Yes, okay.
So yes, it's going to need to be done once we actually have it. to be reviewed. And then of 7, they want to revisit short-term rentals again. Both the outdoor advertising and the short-term rentals failed at the council meeting that was voted on, yet they want to revisit it, and I don't know exactly why, because I think this council would be less likely to pass it yet again.
Right.
I think they were just working with their,
I think we lost you.
hold on, yeah, there was an incoming call that happened right then that's the downside of doing it on the phone. So what I'll do is, let me put my do not disturb on. Can you hear me all right now?
Yeah, you're great.
Okay, so their list is an ongoing list, so they haven't, it wasn't that they necessarily added it to it, it's this is their list. What they
Okay.
want to avoid is the frustration of going and working on a bunch of stuff only to find out that the council was not interested in pursuing that. So this is where you can give, guidance, so.
Well, those
Yeah,
are 5 and 7 on their list as far as priorities. And I know that looking at their list here, I would like to see the workforce housing, affordable housing role of the planning board moved up, since that's one of the main goals, I believe, of the city council. That's one thing that I'd like to add on. The other thing is I would like to see on this list, which isn't, is building on city-owned land. Because the city should have a say on what is built on their land. And for instance, if workforce housing ends up being able to be built on city leased land, the city needs to have rules and regulations and zoning in place for any building on city-owned land. And that's not on their list at all, and I do think that needs to be there and kind of higher up than what we're looking at there.
Well, and that's what you guys are setting, is you're telling them what you think councils, and remember, it's not just you, it's all of council's objectives are.
Okay, so they just want.
Since I won't be there as a participant or commentator tonight, I will add my 2 cents. I get the agenda item of procedure for building on city-owned land. And there's a lot of different conversations that have that. I will have in my comments, I think I'll mention, we have several conversations starting with workforce housing right now. I think there's a lot of very, very positive things that are starting up in that. And I think they're going to take a year or two just because that's the nature of getting things done. But we have one specific completely private developer who's coming in and wanting to put 10 units on a parcel that was previously 3 lots. That'll be going to planning board for, a conditional use. But that'll probably still be next year's building season before that happens. So there's a lot of stuff going on there, but one of the things that I got to tell you, it stands the hair up on my neck, and I know Joanne's there, but I really feel uncomfortable about the city or municipality in general getting in the real estate business, whether that be leasing. I don't like government to pick winners and losers, and I don't like I don't want us to be in the real estate business. So some of the solutions we're looking at, I'll use a random example. It's not at all random. I don't know how much of this, Joanne, this may be the first that Joanne is hearing about this. But we talked to the same developer that we talked to many, many years ago that does the Section 42 housing. One of the things they were looking at is like moving forward with the old hospital property and getting a grant to clean that up and make that available. And ideally that would need to be purchased and then leased back to them. And in my mind, that's if we reached out to the foundation of the Montana Land Trust, and they bought that land and then leased it back to them, now the city's not involved in the real, you know, we can help with making sure that the grant goes through to help tear it down and all the costs of recovering that. But I'd a whole lot rather, as an example, see Montana Land Trust buy that piece of land and lease it to them than the city buy that piece of land and lease it to them.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Like, gets our hands out of it completely. We're just kind of facilitating.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll have to figure out what choices we have as we go down the way. I just want to make sure that there is a procedure in place.
Oh, I agree.
I always go back to the observatory that was built prior to having the complete funds, and it never went through the planning board, and what was presented to the city council didn't happen that way. So I think that we just need a good, solid procedure. If anybody's going to build a permanent structure, that may end up being the city's permanent structure to deal with.
Yep.
I know some of the things on the board, the planning board's list, are things they must do. They're supposed to have an urban marijuana commercial cultivation area. The marijuana laws say that we have to have some place for that. And so they were trying to find a place.
Oh, okay.
But we don't have it in our small city.
No.
So they need to come to some consensus on that we can't,
Yeah,
simply because we are restricted.
not applicable.
The other things that, I would say the things that need to go on the very bottom, which is already citywide noise level reviews. What does the planning board have to do with that? We have a regulation for noise.
Yeah, and I believe that we actually have brought this up when I was on the, public health and safety.
The noise.
Yeah, it was a noise, and more pertinent to like 4th of July and
Fireworks.
holidays and fireworks and how that works, but.
Yeah, we've had that discussion.
Mhm.
Sexually oriented businesses is also way down at the bottom of the list. Until somebody, by federal law, we have to have a location for a sexually oriented business. And the way the zoning is written is there's a certain number of feet from schools, from bars, from churches. So there was one location, I think it's Berkshire Hathaway building,
That fits the criteria?
that fits the criteria.
Oh, we laughed about that at ML, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
The stripper pole.
So,
I was like, where's your light?
but that kind of needs to just be reviewed to make sure.
Okay.
Review the wireless communications facility zone. I don't see these as top priorities unless
No.
there's something coming down that we don't know.
Yeah, that's why I was like, is it on there because it's required, or has it been mentioned?
No,
Okay.
no. I kind of go with, there's two things on here, the allowed uses table and definitions update, which the subcommittee of the planning board, of which I was on, it was very confusing. It's very all-encompassing about anything that might ever come up in front of the planning board. The problem is, the planning director said that there are things that weren't there, and if it doesn't say it's allowed, then it's not allowed. And so there were a lot of things she had to kind of go, oh, okay, well, this is kind of that. So she wanted this huge list of a zillion things. And so it was so big that the planning board couldn't deal with it.
Okay.
And we spent 5 months, 6 months on making this list, which is still bizarre. But then it has prohibited use list, and I think maybe a prohibited use list would be a lot quicker than
Allowed.
an allowed use list. So to me, it's one or the other.
Well, yeah, to me, they seem like they would go hand in hand. I don't, like, it seems like you said it would be easier to say what's not allowed,
Than what is allowed.
but then I guess there's also that gray area of implied allowance, and that's a fun one.
I felt like part of that too, Sandy, was an effort to regulate short-term rentals.
It was,
Oh,
It was.
It was just kind of a runaround, using it as.
Okay.
because they pulled out short-term rentals,
Mhm.
and that was what was presented to the city council that failed.
Okay.
So that's what failed at city council, was the, short-term rental rule regulations, where they allowed them in one zone and not in another, or only one in that zone, and, you know, it got to the point where you were shoving all the short-term rentals into one zone, or, you know, and that's not ideal. It's better to spread them out than put them all together.
Yeah.
So there are things in here, I know the urban RV park camping was an issue down at the motel north of town.
So,
But I think it goes beyond that to what's happening in Bozeman.
And that's the
100%.
real thing, is what's
Urban
happening in
camping.
Bozeman is camping on city-owned land.
it is, we were just up there 2 weeks ago, and I didn't really have a full grasp or understanding of what they meant by these campers.
Pretty horrific.
It is pretty horrific. I was kind of appalled. I was appalled by the mass.
And summer is even worse.
Right, and this was, I mean, it was winter, and these RVs were no care in the world and trash everywhere, and it was, yeah, I feel like this can open up a door to something similar to Bozeman, and so I just want to be very careful. I was under the assumption that everything down at the other end of town down there was all, like, permittable when they put in their RV campsites right there, is that, and then some of
At the
the,
north end.
yeah.
An RV campsite has to be approved at the state level.
Oh, okay.
And of course, it has to go with our zoning.
Mhm.
And I know the planning board felt I wasn't in on that decision for whatever reason, and I know that they were not happy with the position they were in,
Okay.
and ended up approving it supposedly. But there's also the issue of people with RVs parking in front of the house and draping electrical cords across the sidewalk.
Yeah, that was the big one that I was,
Houses and.
right, having, you know, using it as an extra bedroom for guests
Exactly.
without
Yeah.
any.
And so I'm thinking that
Rules
that
and
should be something that is closer to the top of the
I
list.
agree. Yes, especially come summer, I
Yeah,
see that as
well,
well.
I think that every year it gets a little bit more prevalent.
Mhm.
We see more and more
Mhm.
RVs parked, for long periods of time.
Mhm. Agreed.
And so I kind of thought that should be moved up.
Sunshine House,
Mhm.
they're living in it.
So I'm kind of at
The grocery?
where the top four for sure,
Okay,
in whatever order.
okay. Yeah, I mean,
I'm gonna leave the master plan off because I don't think it's gonna even be finished this year.
no, agreed. I think that can, yeah.
The multi-dwelling, multiplex clarification,
Yeah, what is,
I would need more clarification myself on
I need clarification on the clarification.
on the clarification. The cultivation, the marijuana cultivation, I think isn't going to be a big, long deal because there is no place for it.
No, not in
So
city
I think
limits.
it's simply a matter of verbiage.
Okay.
And then the urban RV park, workforce housing,
Mhm.
and maybe and then procedure for city-owned land, for building on city-owned land. I don't think that the planning board needs 16 things to work on.
No, I agree.
And I think I'd like to give them, like, maybe the top 10.
Okay.
Are you striking the short-term rentals and
I-
the urban light or
I'm-
the downtown lighting thing just by virtue of it didn't pass last time?
It didn't pass.
I'm
and-
going to make that suggestion to the city council because it didn't pass once.
It's not gonna have support with this council.
It's not gonna have any more support with this council than it did with the last council.
I know how frustrating it was for the planning board to put all that time and effort into those two topics,
I know.
and it went nowhere.
Well, and I feel bad because obviously it was a lot of work that was put into it, but my disagreement with it was they had two completely separate
Yeah,
ordinances.
rolled into one.
All rolled into one ordinance.
Yeah.
I don't see how one had to do with the other, and that was really concerning to me, because I was like, I'm a busy person, I don't have the time to sit there and read through all the 80-some pages that it was. And if that was so blatant to me, what else was slipped in there? So I was totally against that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well, and that's the whole basis of this, is that they were sent off to work on on things without any input from the board that ultimately has to approve it. And so we're just not going to let that happen again, right? That's what you're doing. That's the why.
Right, we're flipping it to where we give them, hey, this is what we think you guys should be working on. This is our suggestion, priority list.
In what order?
Yeah.
Now, the other thing, so right now we're at 9, I'm not including sexually oriented businesses yet, since it's such a narrow area for them to do it. Minimum lot size, the minimum lot size right now is 5,000 square feet
In town?
in town.
But the state changed the what trumps what there? Does this new state regulation trump that?
Well, that was why, we have the review of the new state regulations in here,
Oh,
at, closer to the top of the list,
okay.
like probably number 3. Obviously, the downtown plan and the growth policy is going to be worked on through Great West. So I think the very first thing we should do after those two, whenever they come to the planning board, should be reviewing the state regulations to see where our zoning is.
Yeah, I think that should almost be top of our list.
I think so too.
Yeah,
And then one-
2,500 square feet now.
What is it?
2,500.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Is there stated?
Well, I think that the concept there was to get more houses in a more condensed area.
With the housing initiative.
It was a housing initiative. So we are reviewing the state regs as really number one, doing the growth policy and downtown plan as they come through. What if we made workforce housing next? And just deciding what the role of the planning board would be within that.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the minimum lot size should be grouped with the ADU. Well, maybe not.
This is zoning.
I know, but an ADU can be built on one parcel of land.
Well, that whole multi-dwelling multiplex clarification, I feel like that can be lumped with the minimum lot size, because
I mean, wouldn't that all be part of zoning regulations
I feel like it would be.
changes if there were?
Yeah, I feel like those two kind of go hand in hand, because the reason it is such a large,
And multi-dwelling, that implies that there is more than one dwelling on one piece of
Right.
land. We already have, this area is 2 units,
Mhm.
and it's conditional use for larger than up to 4,
Mhm.
and, it already is in the zoning, so I don't, that's why I was kind of
clarification on that.
confused on what they mean by that.
Okay.
The prohibited use list, I could see that
Mhm.
as one of the top 10 priorities, probably closer to the bottom.
Okay.
Exactly what is prohibited in Red Lodge?
Yeah.
What would not be considered.
What comes to mind?
Right
Urban
away,
camping.
right away my mind goes to maybe RV parks, more RV parks in the city limits.
Or urban camping or.
Yeah, or obviously campgrounds and RV parks
Campground.
are all kind of, they need more space than what we really have.
Yeah, we need that space for houses.
Yeah.
So should we, all right, so prohibited use,
Can I say something just from
Anytime.
an outsider's point of view completely?
Mhm.
It seems like we should figure out what kind of workforce housing we want that's feasible, and then see if the zoning fits our concept, rather than starting with the zoning and then go to the concept. So if you want, more dense populations within the city, which is, a lot of people say is the most efficient thing for the city, you make more money that way, you get more taxes to support services. If that's the goal, then the zoning has to fit that goal, rather than start with the zoning and then try and work it around to
like
get
something to
to.
match it.
Well,
Yeah,
the
to match what
R4.
your, what your goal is for workforce housing, to be flexible enough with with the zoning regulations so that you can adapt your vision for workforce housing. Sorry.
Well, I know that R4 is designed to be denser.
Mm-hmm.
That was the whole concept, which is basically the north side of town.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, that's where workforce housing would go. But again, you know, putting 4, 6, or 8 units on a piece of property, which I think you can go up to 8 right now, is allowed.
Yeah.
It's allowed, so,
So it's already taken care of. Okay.
yeah, so the zoning is already there for that.
Good.
Mhm.
Okay.
People just won't sell their land.
Well, as for the ADUs are allowed, you know, to be maybe 2 or maybe 2-story or.
2 stories are allowed.
Mhm.
We changed
We
the,
changed it.
community entrance to 3 stories
Mm-hmm.
with the concept that you could have, you know, a commercial downstairs and maybe 2 more floors of, so there's been a lot of movement towards multifamily housing type of thing, whether it's workforce or not.
But then adapting to the, possibility of improving the infrastructure, the water and sewer to accommodate that.
Mhm.
So that's, in a way, it's the use of land. So I don't know if that's covered or not, but.
Well, and
Yeah,
I
we
would kind of
don't
wonder,
get into
the
that.
the infrastructure would probably be, I'm assuming, put into the revitalization.
Right. Well, it's a downtown, I don't know. They're trying to avoid saying the revitalization plan, since the downtown's been revitalized. And so I've been calling it the downtown plan, but, so I'm not really sure.
Well, and the growth policy is where, with Great West, I just kind of pulled all of the infrastructure and all of that kind of together.
They're going to do the basics.
Yeah.
They're gonna look at our growth policy, find the areas that we need to change to match state law
Okay.
as well with the growth policy.
Mhm.
So until the planning board gets that, they have nothing really that they've been told to work on.
Right. Well, they can't really, until it matches.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking that we just give the, city council a list of the downtown revitalization, review the growth policy, the ADU, review state regulations, urban marijuana commercial cultivation, urban RV park camping, workforce housing and the role of the planning board, prohibited use, minimum lot size, and procedure for building on city-owned land. If we only gave them that list, and then I'll make a second list
Okay.
for them, for the ones that we've left off, that then they can move things around.
Yeah, like if they can't
I
really.
think that's a lot of things to ask them to do.
It is, that's why then we'll put it in priority.
Yeah, I think you could combine the minimum lot size with the state regulations, because that's really one and the same.
Yeah, well, the state regulations, we just have to make sure our zoning's up to par, and I honestly think that, that Corey's working on that, to identify areas in our zoning that do not comply with the new state regs.
Okay.
So some of those are gonna be really short or not now,
Mhm.
which would give them, you know, some start anyway. Okay, so.
I was just gonna add one more thing before we got too off of that, as you guys were talking about zoning and land use and stuff. And it kind of fits, I don't know how it fits into the stuff of the planning board or just for this group. But there are an awful lot of conversations we are having right now about, annexations too. So there's a lot of adjacent land masses near the city, where there could be additional developable land. And so I think that needs to be put in our bucket of looking at things a little bit differently than we have, and considering if that's something we want to consider and use.
And the planning board's never done an annexation, at least not in the last 13 years. So maybe when we, I think.
Do we want to get their input and guidance on on what we should take into account when we are annexing. Ultimately, it's the city council's decision whether we annex something or de-annex something. And we've done both, you know, over the last few years. But if that's something that you think it's appropriate or would like to get input and guidance from them on, it seems to me to fit into that conversation of workforce housing, both for the Broadway businesses as well as the teachers, emergency workers, hospital workers, et cetera. Because as somebody mentioned earlier, there's a couple of different classes there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it does kind of, flow into that. So I put that on the list too, Dave. Okay, the next item is the URD funding, and I know that we talked last time about the goals of the Urban Renewal District, and there were multiple goals in there. Obviously, it's to, get rid of the areas of light, and they've had that one person talk to them about a $12,000 grant to pave the driveway for a coffee kiosk. And the coffee kiosk has been there a long time, and they've fluffed it up, and it looks a lot better than it did. So that might fit the blight concept, but I believe the Urban Renewal District was more developed to accommodate workforce housing and to take a section of our town that has available land and decrepit buildings that could be repurposed and used the right way. And because of that, we created the TIF fund so that it could do it. One of the things that we discussed was setting a cap, in other words, saying, we don't know, Jeremy, do you know yet how much money is going to be in the URD fund?
I had asked Dave and hopefully Lonnie to calculate that for us, but
It's
if my
still
back of the envelope is correct, it's around 100,000.
about 100,000.
Yeah, for this first year.
And I was thinking that we would need to have like 200,000 in there as a base without spending it.
To start awarding. Yeah.
Because if we did get a project that somebody wanted to put in a 60-unit building,
Need to be able to manage.
and they wanted a large amount, and it truly fits workforce exactly what we want, we want to have that money available. And one of the ways, we were suggesting for the URD board is come up with a point system, that they get so many points for workforce housing, so many points for getting rid of blight, you know, the different projects, but to judge it based on that and not spend all the money as soon as you get it.
Right,
Right.
agreed.
Well, that's definitely something that we've been, talking about in our most recent meeting. And that point system has come up, and it's probably something that that was basically our segue into our next meeting. Whenever we can get those, scheduled again. But,
Well, it's gonna take some thought on how to come up with a point system.
for sure, and, you know, if I had suggestions personally, it would be maybe to take a look at the urban renewal plan itself, as council, as planning board. You know, and if you really want to be more specific, then make it more specific. You know, it's kind of fuzzy at the moment.
I thought it was too.
And so, if that could be tightened up, then that would help the board and, you know, council to really, you know, better understand what's a good project, what's, you know, maybe not as high a priority. So,
Did that plan identify any particular project?
No.
Specific, and
No.
it's just general?
yeah, and, you know, to some extent, it has to be, to fit the state requirement for eliminating blight, you know, but it could certainly be tuned up.
Yeah, I mean, there were requirements for it to be called a URD
Yeah,
and hold back funds.
Yeah.
but the study didn't specifically identify anything.
No, not one thing or another.
Yeah.
And we might not want
To do that.
that specific in the
Yeah.
plan,
Right.
but we do need maybe some better guidelines.
It needs to be tightened up a little bit, yeah.
figure the point system.
Yeah,
Um,
okay, well, good, I'm glad
But
that
as
they're,
far as building up to a certain base, I think that's a really good idea.
yeah, I believe so
To
too.
not give any grants until we reach a certain,
And another thing we discussed was having, you know, maybe an annual, you know, as we were looking at the ways, other TIFs operate and things, some of them wait until the end of the fiscal year, or, you know, they pick a certain time per year, and then they look at all the proposals, if there's more than one, and really kind of rank them according to their points, according to, you know, needs, versus, you know, having one-offs that you have to say yes and no to then and there is a
That's a
little
good
bit.
idea.
make it more
Right.
competitive.
It makes it more competitive, and it makes you really hone.
Well, and also then you know how much money you have.
Right,
Well, and you feel like you made a conscious choice.
Yeah.
Like you weighed
Right.
all the benefits of
Yeah.
each one and picked the best.
well, and applicants, you know, have a better sense of it too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they know which project may be won out, quote unquote, you know, versus theirs maybe.
yeah, well, to kind of.
Instead of just, sorry, we don't think it's quite good enough, or something like that.
There's some really, inventive ways of doing that. And that's to get all the applicants together and discuss it.
Yeah,
And they-
like-
and
Honestly.
select, in a way, yes.
Yeah,
In
and
a
some of them then at some point might pull together and be like, we could work together on this and
Exactly.
be able to do.
I've
this
seen
and
that
that
work a
together.
lot.
They can
really well.
collaborate or even
Yeah.
coach ideas.
So
to
if
create
you
the-
made it a whole learning experience,
Mhm.
especially in the beginning.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So these are the
And we're
discussions we're
different.
having right now in our.
We do
Like
things
to be-
different, we do things different.
We're more collaborative.
We're more collaborative, I like to think.
Well, technically, it's a grant, and so grants have a date that you have to have your
Exactly.
grant request in by.
Yeah,
And we have requirements for the proposal, so, you know, they'd have to give us a certain amount of information and a good budget, and budget narrative, and back it up, and all that stuff. Make them do their homework.
Yeah, we've been meeting for, you know, almost a year, but it's been, you know, a process of passing bylaws, we've got an application, we've, you know, fleshed out, you know, looking at other communities. So we're just now at this point where, that you're talking about, a good compliment.
Well, yeah, there's nothing for you to do right now except to set up procedures.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's where we were going as well.
But as far as, what's the process, because I'm new, so if we recommend, if the committee recommends procedure and such as waiting until we have a certain X amount of money to proceed, and then the procedure would be X, Y, and Z. So then it's presented to the planning board,
It would be presented to the city council,
the city council?
because they're the ones who eventually write the check
Yeah.
and approve. So, the URD committee, agency, could go ahead and tighten this up, get a procedure going, point system, you know, how much they want to hold back, that type of thing. And then present it to the city council for them to add, subtract, and go from there. And then they'd have procedures ready to go when applicants come in.
And then what's the planning board?
Planning board would not get involved unless there's a zoning problem
Okay.
with it, and then it could be a conditional use permit, it could be a design review.
Thank you.
Well, and there might be things that the TIF fund could pay for that would meet a requirement that's imposed by planning,
Mm-hmm.
so that, you know,
Yeah.
it goes back and forth a little bit.
Yeah, once the funds are approved, then it's gonna go to planning board to approve, probably the minimum design review because of, it's in the community entrance, the majority of it.
Unknown caller.
Oh, well, how about that?
I thought Sandy's summary there was really, really good for that ultimately, you know, the checks are written and the rules are going to be set by the city council. But just like the same conversation we had about the planning board before, certainly the urban renewal, board can make comments and suggestions and recommendations, but I sure wouldn't start down a path unless I knew a little bit of what the council was looking for before I did it. So just get that guidance in advance so you don't get frustrated.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Well, and there's a little bit of, our agency has been kind of using the resolution as guidance as to, where our lane is.
Mhm.
And so that does, have some enumerated powers that we're supposed to be doing. So, that's kind of what we're looking at.
Okay.
for that resolution.
Jeremy, is there something there that's contradictory to what I just said, and I need to realign my expectations or understanding looking at the ordinance?
Well, no, not specifically, but, I would just say, so for example, I'm looking at the resolution 3614, the sections powers of the North Community Entrance Urban Renewal Board. Just scanning through it, there are some things that sort of are worded such that they originate with the agency versus council, but, I think it needs to be a conversation both ways. And ultimately, council does approve, the bottom line, so.
Okay, so I think what I heard there is, yes, things can originate from you guys, which I'm okay with, but still, ultimately, they don't take effect until council signs off on it. So it would be wise to seek that input early in your process.
Yeah, so for example, just A says, one of the powers enumerated is to formulate and coordinate a workable program as specified in MCA, which is pretty darn broad. So if you wanted to,
A workable program.
right,
It works.
yeah, just do that, no problem, check mark. So anyway, I feel like it's worded such that some things do originate in the agency versus. I don't know that it should be one way either way.
Yeah. I don't want to create an agency or a board and then tie their hands and tell them what to do, otherwise we should have just done it ourselves. So I have no problem.
Agreed, yeah,
With-
that just puts more control back on us, and I'm like, well, what's the
Yeah.
point then?
Yeah, tell us what you think will work,
Mhm.
because you're gonna be in the trenches with it. Let's look at it. If it looks okay, then we just say, okay, it sounds good. You might want to add this
Mhm.
and let it go at that. I don't want to, I have my finger on everybody's neck telling them what to do, or I would have just done it myself,
Well, a council member rep at our meetings would be great if anyone has time for it, but.
What are they again?
Yeah, great.
Another meeting?
Yeah, I know.
When are the URD meetings?
Isn't that what we were discussing, that they were hit or miss?
Well, they were pretty consistent on the second Monday, but, we need a new, our city planner was our city staff rep, and so that's up in the air right now.
Oh, okay.
So I'm hoping Dave schedules us something soon.
No pressure.
Yeah.
I could see that. Okay, discussion concerning the procedure to approve or disapprove event application.
This word, this,
I don't know exactly why that's there.
okay.
As far as I know, event applications are approved by the mayor. Is that correct, Dave?
Yes, they are. Discussion set procedures so they are indeed. The thing that I'm aware of, that the conversation that had come up is, I'm looking at the agenda and seeing, I'm not seeing, rephrase what it is. So your question, yes, it's the mayor who approves it based on what council passed. But what was the question?
Well, I just have on number 4, discussion concerning the procedure to approve or disapprove event application.
Okay, gotcha. So now I was looking down to number 5 and missing that, sorry. So I don't think it's well, actually, no, it is. I can see where it's phrased as that. So, right now, we don't have an event application in the city. We have a land use application. I think in reality, what we should probably have is an event use application. And one of the line items on the event application is, will there be city land used for it? And I'll give you a really good example of where I think that conversation and discussion comes up. Just looking at time. The bike rally has for years used the area to the west of the airport fence for camping. What they have had is an application to use that for camping. And yet the discussions, as I'm certain everyone remembers and recalls, have really had almost nothing to do with the camping. It's about what's needed downtown. And so if instead of a land use application, we had an event application, is it expected to bring X number of bodies to town, then let us know what's there. And then one of the questions can be, is there a land use that's in it? And then the second part of that was, if we are going to do a recovery fee, hey, we have to bring in, generally they bring in their own porta potties, they bring in their own cleanup, their own security within that area. Look at the dances or street closures that they have downtown. Is there something the city is going to have to do? And if so, are we going to recover those charges, but make it look like a worksheet? So when you're done, if you walk out to the front counter, you're going to see a worksheet for resort tax on here's how you calculate it. Or if you think about, getting a state permit to operate a daycare, it'll say things like, one adult required for every 12 children, or if they're under the age of 2, it's only one adult for every 4 children. But there's some application or some algorithm that can be applied to, if we're going to charge people, that it's the same, rather than being hit and miss. And every year we get threatened to be sued or have the opportunity of being sued because we aren't doing it consistently. So that was the two things, is we've got to be consistent if we're going to do recuperating of fees. And are we better off approaching this from and I know this is your decision, but I think, as I've looked and participated in the process, I think we'd be better served by looking at having an event application as opposed to a land use application, and land use is just a line that's on it. That was the thought. Did I answer the question, and did I understand it correctly?
I think I understand what you're saying. So for instance, let's think Harley rodeo style versus the Yellowstone tour that Jennifer Drinkwalter does with the bikes. Hers is mostly like a land use where they're needing a city-owned land lot to camp and do all their things, versus something that's city-driven, where it's like the street dances and all the bands and things like that, correct?
Yeah, or think of parades, not just the 4th of July parade, but what if somebody puts together some, political protest, or I'm going to do a parade for candidate X or candidate Y or whatever. Think about those sort of things, and the city didn't have any way of regulating that. And part of a future discussion, I'm welcome to help coordinate. I have a neighbor who splits his time between here and New York, and he's done some public events and stuff that you might have heard of. He has an Emmy for the Macy's Day Parade that he did, and the New York Ball Drop. So he's got a little bit of exposure in these things. And he, when I was on council and stuff, there was a lot of times he would just kind of shake his head and say, "What are we doing?" or "How are you doing it?" And he thinks the city should be a sponsor on these things, and then you don't have to pay for it, but then we have a higher say. But it was just, and maybe there's still also land use. To your point, Cinta, maybe there is a land use application that is just, I want to have a part of a park, but there's a lot of things where those two convolute over each other, and we just have to figure out how we want to address it.
Okay, all right, that makes more sense.
We'll have to think on that. I know that for a parade, you're using streets, for the, Red Lodge Area Community Foundation Fun Run. You're using streets, but then you're also using a city park. The other thing that I was kind of in the dark on, that is Lions Park, so Lions Club has an MOU. So do they approve it, or does the city approve it? I was told at one point for Rotary Park that Rotary had to approve the event because we have an MOU. Basically, the next item says lease versus an MOU, and we're not charging people for use under the MOU, but if we were leasing it and getting paid for event, then that's, to me, the difference between a lease and an MOU. But on an MOU, who approves the event? It's approving city-owned land use.
So we have a similar situation with that's what we're trying to sort out right now, and it'll be in comments tonight. But we have the city has an arrangement, an interlocal agreement, with the airport board over a designated piece of land. Currently, or historically, that designated piece of land happened to include land west of the fence at the airport. They gave that to the Home of Champions Rodeo, much the way that the library is given to the library or Rotary Park is given to the Rotary. But one of the things we immediately did is we put in some protocols, like tentatively already, that if they reach out to you, you send them to the city for a land use permit. So that Home of Champions is kind of available for scheduling, conflict avoidance, et cetera, and cleaning it up afterwards and all of that sort of stuff. But that doesn't relieve them from sending it back to us, to make sure the city is able to collect fees if appropriate, et cetera. And I think that's a template that'll work well for Lions Park or Rotary Park or any of the others.
That first, whoever holds the MOU would approve it, but then it would also need city approval as well.
Yeah, they defer. Yeah. So I'm looking to see if I can find the exact minutes of what we have on that. But yeah, that's what we put in place tentatively with the Home of Champions Rodeo right now. Is we're not fighting this, and ultimately I think they're going to give that up. But what's happening is we've set the protocol that says it's still appropriate for the city to be involved here.
Okay, I like that. Yeah. Because with MOUs, I guess there is insurance involved, or not?
And that's the other thing that they verify is that we have insurance. So in that case, they make sure that the airport is listed as a covered insured and that the city is listed as a covered insured.
Okay. Okay, that answers some questions. But I know we're going to hit more and more.
Right, so.
And I think that we're at our time, Dave.
Yes.
So we're going to,
Hang up this meeting and join the next one.
Yeah,
yeah, I think so.
catch in a bit.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you,
I won't be
Jeremy
able to make
and
that.
Joanne.
I can come, but I can't answer.
That's okay. It sounds like